Hello everyone, we are from group 6 and here we go to share about our material, fictional and non-fictional literary works. The definition of fictional and non-fictional literary work. The first is fictional works. In general, fiction refers to plot, setting and characters created from the imagination. A fiction work is made up by an author. It comes from the author's imagination, so it means not true. In fiction, the writer believes that readers will make an effort to follow and interpret indirectly or abstractly. And then non-fiction works. Non-fiction is implies that form of prose which is discussed through events, facts, and information. Non-fiction also refers to factual story, focused on factual events and people. Non-fiction works tend to give facts or true accounts of real things and events. Therefore, works of non-fictional are meant to be factual. Thank you.
Okay everyone, now we have kinds of fiction and non-fiction. The first one is kinds of fiction. The first is novels. Novels is fiction that tells the characters in the story beginning to end with an ending, be it climax or anticlimax. The second is romance. Romance is a fiction that describes the character in the plot that contain many lessons. The last one is short stories. Short story are written work of literature that is far less than a novel, yet story have a certain appeal that you would still be interested in every character produced by the writer. The second one is kinds of nonfiction. The first is pure nonfiction. Pure nonfiction is the writing is composed by an absolutely original depiction. Writers, while developing a pure nonfiction story, are evidence of accountable data. For example, as thesis, journal, paper, and person's resume. The second is creative nonfiction. Creative nonfiction also includes evidence of original data that is then developed into an imaginative essay. It's a paper for literary journalism, such as articles and news.
Hello, my name is Novita Adriana Lomi, and here are the characteristics of fiction. First, fiction is made up by authors and is based on their imaginations. Two, in general, cumulative or indirect language is used in fiction. A relative or indirect truth can be found in fiction. Three, there is no rigid system in fiction works. 4. Most literary fictions appeals to their emotions or feelings of repulsions rather than logic. 5. The work of fiction contains a moral message or commissions. Non-fiction text has this characteristic. First, speaking in a formal or formal tone of voice. 2. Using a language that is denotative. The term denotative refers to a meaning that is objective and balanced. 3. The information contained in the text is true or fact. 4. The style of writing is scientifically popular. And the last, it was derived from either existing or newly discovered source.
Alright, this part is about elements of fiction. So there are 6 elements of a work of fiction. And the first one is theme. Theme is the main idea in a piece of writing. In every writing, there must be a theme that builds the content of the article. The second is setting. Setting is a description of the place, time, and atmosphere in a story. In addition, the setting can also be said as a description. It means that the flow related to time, space, and atmosphere. Third is characters. A character is every individual in the story with their own character. There are protagonists, antagonists, and tritagonist character. And the protagonist is a character who describes a good and positive character. On the other hand, the antagonist describes a bad or negative character. And the protagonist is an intermediate character. 4. Plot. Plot is a series of events that make up the storyline. In the plot, there is a conflict that describes the opposition of each character in the story, which creates tension. And 5. Language style. Language style is the way the writer tells the story, and it usually there are certain figure of speech used by the author, such as figure of speech, comparison, affirmative, and contradiction. And the last is about message. The message is the message that the writer wants to convey to the reader through the story. And one of the things that distinguishes fiction books is that there is a message contained in them, and the message is taken from the overall content of the story that is built. So here are the example of fiction works by some writers.
Non-fiction includes many genres, from memoirs to research journalism, but even the most straightforward of these has more in common with literary fiction than you may realize. And these are the elements of non-fiction literary. First is point of view. A non-fiction story can be told from many of the points of view present in literary fiction. A memoir or autobiography, for example, is a first-person account of personal events, while a standard biography is written by a third-person narrator who has investigated or interviewed subjects before writing from a more distant perspective. Non-fiction may be written in second person using you as the subject if it is in the form of how-to guide or instructional manual. The second is character. Like literary fiction, non-fiction contains characters who act within the story. Two, these characters are real people in non-fiction. They still are represented in writing with the same tools and techniques as fictional characters. Non-fiction stories rely on the same reader empathy as fiction stories, so they must also contain sympathetic or interesting characters for the reader to follow. Because a reader may not know the real life person in the story, an author must introduce and characterize the person just as a fiction writer would, including physical details and description of their behavior. Third is narrative. A non-fiction story follows a sequence of events in the same way a fictional story might, creating a narrative through which the story is told. Narratives in non-fiction may be a linear or non-linear, based on chronology or some other organizing factor. An author writing about the death of her father, for example, may move around from chapter to chapter, capturing different scenes from her childhood and adulthood as they feel relevant to different aspects of her father's life. As with literary fiction, a non-fiction writer can use different narratives to tell the same story in very different ways. The fourth element is dramatization. For a non-fiction story to be compelling, it must not only be true but also interesting enough to be worth to read. Non-fiction stories can center around conflicts and dramatic moments to create literary works with the same emotional beats of fiction. Even journalistic nonfiction, focused solely on reporting works, must effectively with a conflict or dramatic center established in the article's lead paragraphs. Here are the example of non-fiction literary. Thank you for your attention, and if you have a question, let's discuss on e-learning. Thank you.